Stop! Don't take him!
You know what happened to my father?
The boy's voice cracked across the grand ballroom just as two security guards grabbed him by the arms. Crystal glasses stopped halfway to guests' lips. 1,000 conversations died in an instant. 12-year-old Noah Bennett twisted desperately toward the stage, his eyes fixed not on the billionaire receiving a standing ovation, but on a man seated in the front row. "You promised my dad you'd protect us," he shouted. "You said if anything happened, you'd tell the truth." The executive's face drained of color. Billionaire Elias Rowan saw it. That expression wasn't confusion. It was fear. Noah kept struggling as one guard muttered, "Easy, son. You're in the wrong place." "No," Noah cried. "I'm exactly where my dad told me to come." The ballroom fell into a silence so complete that even the orchestra lowered their instruments. Nobody understood why a maintenance worker's son had interrupted the most prestigious corporate gala of the year. Nobody except one man sitting in the front row. And by the end of the night, Elias Rowan would realize the company bearing his family's name had been hiding a secret far more dangerous than anyone imagined. Stay with this story, and if you're enjoying true stories of courage, integrity, and impossible choices, consider subscribing now, because what happens next completely changes everything. The applause never resumed. Elias slowly lowered the glass award in his hand and stepped away from the podium. Hundreds of executives, investors, politicians, and journalists watched in stunned silence as he walked straight toward the frightened boy. "Let him go," Elias said quietly. The guards exchanged uncertain looks. "Mr. Rowan, security protocol." "I said let him go." Their hands released Noah immediately. The boy's breathing came in short, shaky bursts. His sneakers were dusty, his oversized hoodie looked several years old, and his backpack hung from one shoulder by a frayed strap. He clearly didn't belong among tuxedos and evening gowns. Yet he stood his ground. Elias knelt until they were eye level. "My name is Elias," he said gently. "What's yours?" "Noah Bennett." "And your father?" "Dylan Bennett." The name meant nothing to Elias. He frowned. "I'm sorry, Noah. I don't think we've met." "I know. You said your father told you to find me." Noah nodded quickly. "He said if something went wrong, if he didn't come home, I had to find you because you were the only person who didn't know." A murmur swept across the ballroom. Elias blinked. "The only person who didn't know what?" Noah swallowed hard. "He wouldn't tell me. He just kept saying, 'Find Mr. Rowan before they do.'" Before Elias could ask another question, a polished voice interrupted. "We need to move this discussion somewhere private." It was Victor Hale, Horizon Corporation's chief operating officer and Elias's oldest business partner. Victor forced a reassuring smile that never reached his eyes. "The child is frightened," Victor said. "We'll locate his father immediately." Noah turned toward him and took one frightened step backward. "No," Victor froze. "I don't want you looking for him." That single sentence landed harder than any accusation. Elias noticed it. So did everyone else. Victor recovered quickly. "Why would you say that?" Noah's voice became barely louder than a whisper. "Because Dad said if you found him first, nobody else ever would." The room erupted into confused whispers. Victor's smile disappeared for less than a second. But Elias saw it. Fear. Real fear. It vanished almost instantly beneath practiced professionalism. "I think someone has frightened this young man," Victor said calmly. Elias didn't answer. Instead, he looked directly at Noah. "When did you last see your father?" "Yesterday morning." "And he never came home?" "He always comes home." Noah reached into his backpack with trembling hands. For one terrifying second, security tensed again. Instead of anything dangerous, he pulled out a folded maintenance schedule covered in handwritten notes. "Dad gave me this." The paper looked ordinary, until Elias noticed tiny symbols penciled into the margins. Triangles, circles, tiny arrows. Numbers. They weren't random. Someone had hidden a message inside an otherwise routine work schedule. Dad said if he disappeared, Noah whispered. This would explain everything. Victor stepped forward. I'll take that. No. Elias accepted the paper before Victor could reach it. The CEO's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Mr. Rowan, Victor said carefully. That's company property. Elias folded it once and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Not anymore. For the first time all evening, Victor looked genuinely unsettled. Elias turned back toward the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, I'm postponing tonight's presentation. Gasps echoed across the ballroom. The gala will conclude early. Questions exploded immediately. Journalists shouted. Investors demanded explanations. Board members looked horrified. Elias ignored every one of them. His attention remained fixed on Noah. Come with me. They walked through a side hallway away from cameras. Only after the heavy doors closed behind them did Elias speak again. I want you to tell me everything. Noah sat silently for several seconds. Finally he whispered, Dad fixes things. I know. He fixes elevators, lights, broken pipes, anything. Elias nodded patiently. But about 3 months ago, he stopped fixing only broken machines. What do you mean? He said the building itself was sick. Elias frowned. Sick. He kept saying someone was covering cracks instead of repairing them. The words settled heavily between them. What kind of cracks? I don't know. He wouldn't explain? He tried. Noah looked down. Then every time he started talking, someone would call him into work. The coincidence sounded ridiculous. Yet Noah wasn't exaggerating. He believed every word. Last week, Noah continued, Dad started writing everything down instead. The notes. No. The journal. What journal? Noah's eyes widened. You don't have it? Elias shook his head. Dad hid it. Where? He said only honest people could find it. Before Elias could ask another question, his assistant rushed into the room. Sir, she looked shaken. We've checked personnel records. And Dylan Bennett never clocked out yesterday. Elias stood. What? His security badge entered Horizon Tower yesterday morning. She hesitated. It never left. Silence. Noah stared at her. What does that mean? She couldn't answer, because there wasn't one. If Dylan Bennett had never exited the building, where was he? Within minutes, Elias was walking through Horizon Tower's after-hours corridors with Noah beside him. The skyscraper that had always filled him with pride suddenly felt unfamiliar. Every polished floor reflected empty hallways. Every locked office door seemed to hide another unanswered question. The overnight maintenance supervisor met them near the service elevators. His name was Arthur Mills, and sweat glistened across his forehead despite the cool air. You supervised Dylan? Arthur nodded too quickly. Yes, sir. When did you last see him? Arthur hesitated. Yesterday afternoon. Doing what? Routine inspections. Where? The lower mechanical levels. Was anyone with him? I don't remember. Elias looked at Noah. The boy quietly shook his head. Arthur was lying. Not because of what he said. Because maintenance workers remembered everything. Every room. Every repair. Every shift. Forgetting wasn't part of their job. Elias took one slow step closer. Arthur. Yes, sir? If you were afraid, what would stop you from telling me the truth? Arthur's eyes drifted toward the security cameras mounted above the hallway. That told Elias everything. Someone wasn't just watching the building. Someone was watching the workers. Arthur leaned closer until his voice became almost inaudible. If you really want answers, he swallowed. Don't start on the executive floors. Elias narrowed his eyes. Where do I start? Arthur glanced once more at the camera, then whispered 6 words that made Elias's heart pound harder than it had in years. Start where the blue elevators end. Before Elias could ask what that meant, Every light in the hallway flickered once, then went completely dark. And somewhere deep beneath Horizon Tower, something heavy crashed. The emergency lights snapped on a heartbeat later, washing the hallway in a cold red glow that made every face look unfamiliar. Noah instinctively grabbed Elias's sleeve. Arthur Mills didn't wait for questions. He stepped backward so quickly that he nearly tripped over a toolbox. "I didn't say anything," Arthur whispered. "You never heard me." Then he hurried away. Elias called after him, but the maintenance supervisor disappeared around the corner before another word could be spoken. The crash echoed again. Not above them, below them. Noah looked toward the service elevators. The blue elevators. Elias followed his gaze. Horizon Tower had 3 banks of elevators. The polished silver ones carried executives. The glass elevators served guests. Only the faded blue service elevators reached the mechanical levels buried beneath the building. He had owned the tower for 12 years. He had never ridden them. "We're going down," Elias said. His assistant immediately protested. "Sir, security should clear the area first." Elias shook his head. "If someone is hiding evidence, every minute we wait gives them another chance to destroy it." The old elevator groaned as it descended far below the lobby. The display passed B1, B2, B3, then levels Elias had never noticed on any public blueprint. B5, B6, B7. The doors opened onto a corridor lined with aging concrete walls instead of polished marble. The air smelled of machine oil and damp steel. Pipes stretched overhead like veins through the ceiling. Noah pointed toward a faded yellow line painted on the floor. "Dad always said never step outside that line unless he was with me." "Why?" "He said some things down here were dangerous." Before Elias could respond, they heard voices. 2 men, arguing. "He shouldn't have copied the records. You should have taken the notebook. It wasn't there." The voices stopped. Footsteps rushed away. Elias sprinted toward the sound, but by the time he rounded the corner, the hallway was empty. Only a rolling maintenance cart remained. One drawer hung open. Inside lay a single work glove. Embroidered across the wrist were the initials DB. Noah immediately recognized it. "That's Dad's." He picked it up carefully, as though afraid it might disappear. Elias examined the cart. Fresh scrape marks covered its wheels. Something extremely heavy had been moved recently. Then he noticed another detail. Tiny blue chalk arrows had been drawn on the concrete wall only inches above the floor. They looked almost childish. Noah smiled for the first time all night. "Dad made those. You know what they mean?" "He used them whenever he wanted me to solve puzzles." Elias looked at the arrows again. "They're leading somewhere." The trail ended at an old storage room. The lock had already been forced open. Inside, shelves stood mostly empty except for dusty equipment that hadn't been used in years. Nothing seemed unusual, until Noah crouched beside an old industrial fan. He'd hide things where nobody wanted to clean. The boy reached underneath. His fingers touched tape. He carefully pulled out a waterproof envelope. Inside wasn't a journal. It was dozens of photographs. Each picture showed structural damage. Hairline fractures hidden behind decorative wall panels. Support beams with rust spreading beneath fresh paint. Temporary braces disguised as permanent repairs. Dates were written carefully beneath every image. Some stretched back nearly 4 years. Elias stared at them in disbelief. "This can't be real." "It is," Noah whispered. "My dad took everyone." Folded beneath the photographs was a handwritten note. It wasn't addressed to the police. It wasn't addressed to the media. It was addressed to Elias Rowan. His hands trembled as he unfolded it. "Mr. Rowan, if you're reading this, then I ran out of time. I know people will think I'm causing trouble, but I spent 22 years repairing this building. Buildings talk. Steel bends before it breaks. Concrete whispers before it falls. This tower is asking for help, and nobody upstairs wants to listen. I couldn't watch innocent people get hurt." Elias continued reading silently. "I don't know who I can trust anymore, but I've watched you long enough to believe one thing. If you ever learn the truth before it's too late, you'll choose people over profit. Noah watched Elias's face. My dad believed in you. Elias slowly lowered the letter. I didn't even know his name. No. But he knew yours. A loud metallic slam echoed outside the storage room. Someone had closed the corridor's fire doors. They were no longer alone. Elias stepped into the hallway. Nothing. Just silence. Too much silence. Then his phone vibrated. An unknown number. He answered immediately. Hello. A distorted voice spoke only one sentence. If you care about the boy, leave the building. The call ended. No number remained. Only private caller. Noah looked up. What did they say? Elias didn't lie. They know you're with me. The boy swallowed hard. They've always known. The realization struck Elias with chilling force. Someone had been watching Dylan. Now they were watching Noah. And they were watching him. Security cameras covered nearly every corridor. Normally they represented safety. Now they felt like eyes. His assistant hurried over. Sir, local police are on their way. Good. She hesitated. Actually, maybe not. What do you mean? She handed him her tablet. Several news alerts had already appeared online. Billionaire abandons charity gala. Horizon CEO linked to missing employee. Corporate cover-up? Someone had leaked the story within the hour. Investors were already calling. Board members demanded emergency meetings. The company was beginning to unravel. Before Elias could process it, another message arrived. This time by email. No sender. Only an attachment. He opened it. It was surveillance footage from the previous afternoon. Dylan Bennett stood in the mechanical corridor carrying a locked archive case. He looked directly into the camera. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not because he was safe. Because he knew someone would eventually watch the recording. He tapped his wristwatch twice. Then pointed toward the ceiling. The video ended. Noah frowned. Why would Dad do that? Elias replayed it. Again. Then he noticed it. Dylan wasn't pointing upward. He was pointing toward something attached above the camera. A maintenance access panel. The one place nobody ever looked. Without another word, Elias climbed onto a nearby ladder. He pried open the metal panel. Inside rested a small magnetic tin. His hands shook as he opened it. There was no journal, no cache, no hard drive, only a tiny brass key. Wrapped around it was another handwritten note. The truth isn't hidden underground. It's hidden where everyone looks but nobody sees. On the back was one final line. Office 4812. Elias froze. Office 4812 wasn't an executive suite. It wasn't a maintenance room. It belonged to Victor Hale. For the first time, Elias realized this was never just about a missing maintenance worker. Someone at the very top of Horizon Corporation had been living a double life. And if Dylan Bennett had risked everything to leave that key behind, whatever it unlocked was powerful enough to bring an empire to its knees. If you're wondering how Elias gets out of this, and what Victor has been hiding all along, make sure you subscribe before we go further, because the next chapter changes everything. As Elias closed his hand around the brass key, his phone rang again. This time the caller ID displayed a name he never expected to see. Dylan Bennett. Elias answered instantly. Dylan. There was only heavy breathing. Then a whisper. They know you found the key. The line crackled violently. One final sentence came through. Don't trust. A deafening burst of static swallowed the rest. The call disconnected. And at that exact moment, every monitor in Horizon Tower went black. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. Every screen in Horizon Tower had gone dark. The security monitors, the employee terminals, the digital displays in the elevators. Everything. Then, one by one, the screens came back. But they weren't showing security footage anymore. They were showing a single document. Company file. A file Elias had never seen before. At the top of the page were 3 words that made his stomach tighten. Structural risk assessment. Below it were hundreds of pages of reports, signatures, and internal approvals. Every inspection Dylan Bennett had warned about. every repair that had been delayed, every safety concern employees had reported. The evidence was there, not hidden, not destroyed, just buried beneath layers of corporate approval stamps. Elias scrolled through the documents faster. The names appeared one after another. Managers, directors, executives, and finally, Victor Hale. Approved, authorized, reviewed. Elias stared at the screen. The man who had stood beside him for more than a decade had not been unaware. He had been involved. His assistant looked horrified. "Sir." Elias didn't answer, because something worse had just appeared. A message at the bottom of the screen. Upload complete. Someone had scheduled these files to become public. Dylan hadn't just been collecting evidence. He had created a final backup. A dead man's switch. Except Dylan wasn't dead. Not yet. Elias grabbed his phone and called the number again. This time, someone answered immediately. "Dylan, where are you?" For several seconds, there was only silence. Then a weak voice responded. "Mr. Rowan?" Elias closed his eyes. "Dylan, where are you? I didn't know if you'd believe me. Your son is with me." A sharp breath came through the phone. "Noah. He's safe." The silence that followed was different. It was relief. Real relief. "Thank God." Elias looked at the boy standing nearby. "Dylan, why didn't you come forward?" The answer came quietly. "Because every person who tried before me disappeared from the company." Elias looked around the underground corridor. "Where are you?" "A maintenance room beneath the old East Wing." "Why?" "Because I needed time." "Time for what?" Dylan's voice became heavier. "To prove that the damage wasn't accidental." Elias tightened his grip on the phone. "What are you saying?" "I found something worse than ignored repairs." Pause. They weren't just hiding problems. The line crackled. They were creating them. Elias felt the air leave the room. "What does that mean?" "Dangerous shortcuts. Cheap materials. False inspections. They saved millions by pretending everything was fine." Noah listened silently. His father was finally telling the truth. But there was still one question. "Why didn't you tell me directly?" Dylan gave a tired laugh. "Because I tried." Elias froze. "You did. 3 times." The words hit harder than expected. Dylan continued. "I sent reports to your office. I left messages. I asked for a meeting." Elias looked at his assistant. She immediately understood. Someone had intercepted them. Every attempt Dylan made had been blocked before reaching him. "I thought you didn't care," Dylan admitted. The honesty hurt more than an accusation. "I thought maybe the man everyone talked about was gone." Elias looked at the tower around him. The company he inherited. The company he expanded. The company he proudly defended. And suddenly he wondered how many people had suffered while he was busy believing everything was under control. "I care now," Elias said. Dylan was silent. Then he replied, "Then don't just expose them." Elias frowned. "What?" "Fix what happens after." The words stayed with him, because Dylan wasn't asking for revenge. He was asking for change. Within 48 hours, the truth reached the public. Independent investigators entered Horizon Tower. Employees who had spent years afraid finally spoke. Former workers returned with documents. Engineers confirmed what Dylan had discovered. The company had not collapsed because of one bad decision. It had been slowly damaged by hundreds of people choosing convenience over responsibility. Victor Hale was removed from his position. Several executives resigned. Investors panicked. The company's stock dropped. Everyone expected Elias to fight back, to protect his fortune, to deny responsibility. Instead, he stood before cameras outside Horizon Tower. Thousands watched the billionaire who had once built his reputation on success now admit failure. "I built this company believing numbers were the measure of achievement," Elias said. "But I was wrong." Reporters shouted questions. "Are you admitting negligence? Will you step down? How much did you know?" Elias waited until the noise faded. "I should have listened sooner." The sentence surprised everyone. I was the person with the most power to fix this, and I failed to recognize the people who were warning me. Then he announced something nobody expected. Horizon would rebuild. Not just the buildings, the culture. Every employee would receive a direct reporting system outside executive control. Maintenance workers would have seats on safety committees. Profits would be tied to employee well-being. And Dylan Bennett would lead the new workplace safety division. When reporters asked why he trusted a maintenance worker with such responsibility, Elias gave a simple answer. Because he was brave enough to tell me the truth when everyone else was afraid. Years passed. Horizon Corporation survived. But it became something different. Not the company that built the tallest towers. The company known for building the safest ones. And Noah Bennett grew up watching all of it. The boy who once walked into a Billionaire's gala wearing worn-out sneakers became an engineer himself. Not because he wanted wealth. Because he wanted to build places where families could feel safe. 10 years after that night, Elias stood inside Horizon's newest building. But this time there was no luxury gala. No celebrities. No cameras. Only employees and families gathered for the opening of a new engineering center. Noah stood at the front. Confident. Older. Carrying the same backpack he had worn years earlier. Except now it held blueprints. He approached Elias with a small wooden box. I kept something. Elias smiled. What is it? Noah opened the box. Inside was the old maintenance schedule his father had given him. The same paper covered in hidden symbols. I used to think my dad left this because he wanted to expose someone. Elias looked at the notes. What changed? Noah smiled. I realized he left it because he wanted someone to listen. The two stood silently. A child who once interrupted a billionaire celebration had become the person helping rebuild his legacy. Elias looked through the glass walls of the building. Thousands of people moved safely inside. Workers, families, students, people who would never know how close everything came to falling apart. And maybe that was the greatest victory. Not that a company survived. Not that a billionaire saved his reputation. But that one forgotten worker proved something powerful. A person's value is not determined by their title. Not by their salary. Not by the room they are allowed to enter. Dylan Bennett had been considered invisible by powerful people. Yet he was the one person who saw the truth clearly. Elias spent years building an empire. But Dylan taught him how to build something greater. Trust. Because the strongest foundations are not made from steel. They are made from people who have the courage to speak. And leaders who have the humility to listen. If this story reminded you that true success is measured by the lives we protect and the people we choose to hear, subscribe for more powerful stories about courage, kindness, and the moments that change everything.